Okay, so we have got a Vokera Compact. That's the details, and it's locking out 4 or 5 times a day, according to the lady. So we're going to have a look and try and see what could be causing this. That we will see. So I've got NTC overheat, cables for the fan and the air pressure switch. Down here we have pump, PRV, water pressure sensor, the back there, this hot water flow switch, transformer like the one earlier, gas valve, and that is about it. Let's have a look what we got there. Okay, and we've got another NTC on there. So this is what's known as a bithermal heat exchanger. I'm just going to flip this round. So because this heat exchanger has 4 pipes going to it, so there's the mains in with the, there's the mains in, there's the hot out. Simply runs up there, goes through that main heat exchanger, as well as the flow and return, which are these pipes here, that one there and that one at the back. So because all 4 pipes run through that heat exchanger called a bithermal heat exchanger, this is quite old technology now. Modern boilers aren't made like this. So let's do the fluid checks while we're here. It's a bit crusty, but there's nothing wrong with that, it's solid. It's all good. Look at that, okay. Seems to be okay, right. In here, we're going to take that front insulation panel off. Air pressure switch, fan, nothing else in there really. Electrode, air pressure switch, fan, burner, main heat exchanger. So I'm going to whip this cover off, undo the 2 screws at the bottom, we're missing the 2 further up. Have a look in there, do a visual and then get it back together and see what's what. Okay, so this electrode's a bit dirty, heat exchanger's not bad, a little bit crusty but nothing major there. So I'll clean that electrode up, I'll give the burner a little wipe over, put it back together and start testing. Fans running. Third ignition. Okay. It's gone off. Has that gone up on temperature? There you go, red. Fan was running there, and then it started to light and then failed. See what happens again. Fan running. Looks like it's going to fail again. Yep. Okay, so this looks like a common Vokera issue. It's the Venturi probably. Or the fan's a little bit noisy with all of that, but on Vokeras the Venturis are made of brass and they get like scale build up of them because condensation forms in the fluidway when a boiler's run for 2 seconds. You get condensation forms and that damages the it corrodes the brass ever so slightly, and so you get like limescale, what appears to be limescale on it. So more than likely that's what's affecting this boiler. And a good test for that is probably just crack this open a little bit, like that. So look, that's just holding that ever so slightly open. Don't want this to run for too long to get too hot, or maybe not. And then, if that made the air pressure switch. Didn't appear to, so I can check it on the board to confirm whether it's making or breaking the air pressure switch. Okay, so just crack that open. Nothing. So what I'm going to do now, it's going to go red again. Perfect. So the boiler's going consistently to fault, which is really good for testing. Really good. Okay, so using the wiring diagram, I've looked at this, and I think it's these two black wires here. So I'm going to test them. But what I've done, I've got a U-gauge tube on the air pressure switch, so I'm going to make and break that with my mouth like this, and check that them wires, the continuity and whatnot changes. I'm assuming it's this one, because there's two marked up as pressure switch on here. So you have pressure switch here and pressure switch here. So going with this one. If it's not this one, then obviously it's this one, which is on the other connector. But first thing I'm going to do is get my multimeter on here, cross these two wires and manually make and break that air pressure switch by blowing on it. 0.7 ohms I've got there. I don't know if you guys can see that. There's 0.7 ohms. And when I let go of it, open line. So it's clicking nice. 0.7 ohms. So it sounds good, this one. Put this back on. Okay, so got the same ignition control PCB there, except this time it plugs straight onto another board. But therefore we can kind of assume, not definitely, but we can make the assumption that, if you remember on the earlier one, that's to modulate it. This connector down here is power in and power out to the gas valve. And the connector that you can't really see very well, that's down there, that connector there controls ignition. run it without the case on. Let's do the same thing of turning this down. The fan stopped. Air pressure was made, I heard it made. Let's lit again, okay. Got that on max now. Just turn it down again. Turn it back up. Let's see if we'll get it into a failure mode, maybe we won't. And turns a bit ropey, but all of that, yeah, that's freed off. It's not failing right now. Should we put the case on and see if it fails after that? I think we will. Okay, let's turn it down. It's lovely in hot water. Fan stopped. Right, that time, give it a sec. Okay, watch this, so it's flashing. When it lights, it's lit. It continues to flash. It takes a little while to rectify. It took about 5 seconds to rectify. That seems quite a long time to me. I'm just going to check them electrical connections for rectification. But right now the boiler's working fine. Right, it's lit. That was a bit quicker that time. Do it one more time, let's watch it one more time. And it's lit. Okay, yeah, about 5 seconds, 4 or 5 seconds. Let's clean all that stuff up so we can improve that a little bit. A 10 millibar. We got up to 47 there. Obviously this is delayed, yeah? What you get on this is delayed. So the highest I've seen, one was 47, one was 49, pretty close, so I think I can be pretty confident to say that's going to be okay. Now to actually lock these on high is behind one of these, I'm not sure which one now, let's pull them off. This one, there we go. To lock these on high, you use this little knob here. I'll have to speak to Vokera, it's been a while. That's for setting it all. Can't remember how to do it off the top of my head. I might quickly look at the MIs and do it. Well, there we go. net. It's lit on maximum. It's running on maximum nicely. Holding it. So about at 10 millibar. So let me just check the MIs and see what we're allowed on this. Okay, so I was just packing up to go, and the boiler done the same thing again. Thought it was fixed, it's obviously not. So what I'm doing, I'm actually testing power from the main board to the ignition board, because when it done the fault, I'm sure I could hear the air pressure switch click. So if the air pressure switch made, the next step is that this little board, the ignition board, gets 240 volts. Now, unlike the one earlier, there's no pins to test, so I'm testing that tiny little bit of metal down there. Yeah, and I'm using the earth. But for some reason I go onto a neutral probe, one of the neutrals here, I don't get voltage. I don't get, it doesn't show me anything, so. It's really difficult to know here. I'm going to turn the temperature right up now. So once again, the way I'm testing that, look, my probe is on that tiny little metal pin there that I know is that is the voltage from the main board onto that little ignition board. We've got 240 on there. Got the same thing, got my neon on the ionisation probe, well, this spark and ionisation probe up there. Super difficult to know what's wrong with this one because it's so intermittent. At least that gets to charge. And after this we're going to a Valent that blows fuses once a month. The quick blows on the board. Hopefully that one should be easier to fault find, believe it or not. Click on the air pressure switch, 240, ignition. So I'm just playing a waiting game now, hoping that it's going to stop working again while I've got this on here, which is a bit of drama. Nope. So what I'm hoping to see is that I get the 240 here, but nothing else happens. So if I get the 240 on there, but the boiler does its thing and goes to knockout, puts that red light on down there, then I can be sure it's the little ignition board here. Very difficult to know right now, really, really difficult to know. So I'll get back to you. Okay, so basically I got bored of trying to hold it on that tiny little probe, so I wiggled off this ignition board. I slid literally one strand of that wire in there and then pushed the ignition board back on and wrapped it around my probe. That way I could set this multimeter up here to monitor what was going on while I basically tidy up and clean my tools and generally mess about, hoping this thing goes to fault. And I had my phone filming because if I missed it when it went to lockout, I could review the footage on my phone, because I was completely at a loss on this one. It was so frustrating to go from one to another. It was really, really frustrating to have intermittent fault after intermittent fault, and then knowing that I'm going to a boiler that blows a fuse every month. I mean, it's just crazy, crazy. This is what's hard about the gas industry sometimes. And people don't get it, customers just don't understand. And And just so you know, you're only seeing a very small amount of this footage here. I had this thing set up for well over 40 minutes of it just working. The reason I ended up giving up is because my phone was getting that hot that it kept turning itself off, and it was hot to touch. My phone was physically very hot to touch. I would say 50 degrees, and that's the only reason I gave up in the end on this one. But yeah, so you're seeing a tiny selection of all the footage I shot here. Okay, so on this one here, kind of got to admit defeat because it's just not breaking down. Still got the same setup. The rig is on there to test it. It's been 40 minutes now of it running. But this way I had to stop filming because the flash on the phone was making the phone overheat and it kept turning itself off. So I had to stop filming, but 40 minutes it's been running. It's just been running perfectly. Now I guarantee I take this test equipment off, put it back together, and the red light will be on within a matter of minutes. So it's either that or it was a bad connection on that board and taking it off and putting it back on has fixed it. But right now, working every time. So I have to admit defeat on this. It's one of two things, I'm sure, but I just can't prove it right now. Just can't prove it. Right, there it is back together. I'm gonna see if I no, it's a bit bad. I'm gonna give the customer here my number and ask her to call me if it breaks down again today. I mean, it could be something as simple as that little PCB had a bad connection, and when I wiggled it off and wiggled it back on to put that test on it, it fixed itself. So I mean, it could be as simple as that, but I don't know. Very frustrating. I'd love to get to the bottom of this one. You know for sure what's wrong with it, but it's just too intermittent right now. Never mind, next time. So this must be over a week, maybe a week and a half later, and this customer hasn't called me at all. So hopefully that means the thing is fixed. I don't know what it was, but it's fixed. I guess it's that board, but she hasn't called me, so hopefully that's it.